Good afternoon, and it's actually afternoon to me now. Welcome to Natural Science and Health 2 contact classes, and this is actually exam-based contact classes. My name is Maria Shipandeni, your tutor for this module. As I said, is Natural Science and Health 2, and on the screen you can actually see my contact number as well as my email address, just in case you have questions or you want to find out more information about either the slide or the module. You can call me, you can call me at 081 26 12 950, or send me an email at shipandenim@yahoo.co.uk. shipandenim@yahoo.co.uk, as it appears on your screen. So, as I said, this is actually contact classes that is based on the exam. Before I give hints on the exams, I would like to take you through the module assessment policy. And these are actually some of the policies that you should actually bear in mind, things that you need to know about your module assessment. So this module assessment policy is based on the continuous assessment is actually done per semester, and the module consists of one assignment that is weighing 130 marks for the 14 credits. So 50% semester or continuous assessment mark is actually required for you to get admitted in the exams. That means out of the assessment, your continuous assessment, you should at least contribute about 50% for you to actually get in the exam. So, and the duration of the exam is usually 3 hours, and you have one paper for 3 hours, written exam that is also on 130 marks. So for the final pass marks of 50% is actually required, and that is actually calculated based on the 60% of the examination mark, as well as the 40% from the continuous assessment mark. So for your final pass mark, that means for your final pass mark, you need actually 60% from the examination mark and the contribution of 40% from your continuous assessment mark. So a sub minimum of 50% must be obtained or attained in the exam. So you must at least get 50% from the examination. So, and the examination is actually, or the examination papers are all moderated. So we have moderators that moderate the setting and the marking of examination mark. So your papers, your scripts go through the moderators, as well as the examination papers also go through the moderators. So I'm actually requesting you, or you should bear in mind that you have to read and follow the instructions of the question papers very well. So before you start writing, just try to actually read and follow the instructions of the question papers very well. So, and here I'm also giving you some important notes that you have to bear in mind, and these are important notes for your exams. So the exams is actually 2019 actually exams is structured in a way that it have broom verbs. So we actually have short questions, and with short questions you have verbs like mention, where you are supposed to mention some things that you'll be asked, and you might be asked to define, name, or list. Those are some short questions. Or maybe you are asked to actually distinguish, describe, or actually compare. So, and we also have the essay type of questions, and these essay type of questions actually ask you to explain a certain process or so, or discuss how something is done. So the content is actually very big for your questions, and we make sure that the question paper actually cover the whole module. So you may be asked to explain or discuss, and that discuss, maybe you have to discuss critically some of the processes or things that are you might be asked to discuss. And with all these verbs that we or the questions that we actually have in the paper, it's actually based on your basic knowledge, to just apply your basic knowledge and skill. It's also, we want also to test your level of understanding. This can also be testing the level of understanding, a higher level of understanding, or actually a very low understanding or level of understanding. So all in all, what we are saying is that the exam actually is structured in a short questions or essay type of questions, and we are actually testing your basic knowledge and understanding of the course. And with the level of understanding, we actually test your just a low level of understanding as well as the high level of understanding. And as I said before, the exam is total marks of 130. So you just have to refer to your study guide for more details, because as I said, these questions are actually moderated. So, and it's moderated in a way that the exams cover the whole content of your module. Another important note, as I said, pay attention when you look at your study guide. You actually have learning outcomes of every unit. So you have different units, and pay attention to the learning outcomes of your every unit in your study guide, so that you actually know what is expected from you, what is that we expect you to know from each and every unit in your module. Because as we say, this you can't really like this just try to figure out where the questions are coming from, because this exam is actually covers the whole module. So you have to actually try to make time and pay attention to all the learning outcome, and read the instructions and questions very carefully. And as a teacher, you always have to use practical examples when necessary, just to support or strengthen your answers. And that actually impresses the tutors that much if you know what you're talking about, because it gives you it gives us the assurance that actually you know what you're talking about. So, and you should be able to provide sufficient answers, and that means you don't write too little when you don't need to write, or you don't write too much. So you have actually to check the marks that are allocated for each questions, so you determine the length of your answers. I came across to the point that some students actually write too little when they are supposed to discuss, and then they tend to actually write too much when they are supposed only to mention, for instance, or list something. That's where now they give you all this information, because maybe when it comes to listing, things are much easier, that then the students want to give you everything, even explaining too much than it's necessary. And when they are asked to discuss, they tend to actually write too little. So just make sure that you don't write too much when you don't need to write too much, and you don't write too little when you need to write too much. So provide sufficient answers, and that can actually, you can be guided by the marks that are allocated to the question. So, and I know my handwriting is also not that good, but at least try to write neatly, so that it's easier for us for me to when I'm marking your exam papers. And by all means, try to prepare for exams. Don't just try to read in the whole module in a day or 2 days. Try to make time to prepare for your exams. And so that means you give yourself enough time to study, and you can also use old question papers that can actually guide you. It actually gives you or makes you understand how the questions are structured and what to actually focus, and also test your knowledge to understand whether you are able to answer some of the questions. Okay, and then that take us to exams hints, and here I'm just going to highlight some of the units that I want you to pay attention. Not that they are in exams, but it's some of the units or some of the questions that we asked previously, and I tend to see that sometimes students are actually struggling to answer some of the questions. Either they don't answer satisfactory, or they just sometimes generalize too much that they don't get the marks that they deserve. So some exams marks, I'm not gonna give answers, I'm just gonna at least enlighten you on some of these points that you need to actually look at, and don't make, so that you don't make mistakes like from the previous that are actually got from the previous students. So we have a unit where about teaching and teaching strategies, or is one of the unit topic in one of the units. So with teaching and teaching strategies, there are actually different teaching methods, and you need to know how to execute or how to apply these methods successfully. So sometimes you are asked to discuss or to explain a certain teaching method and how to execute it successfully. So in when you if there is any case that you find this exam, just try to explain what is that method, what is it, what does it entails, and how you can apply it successfully in the classroom. How do you execute it successfully? We have different methods, like for instance, to mention the demonstration method, where you perform an activity and then you want to students to actually see how something is done. You are actually demonstrating. So when you are demonstrating, then how do you demonstrate that activity successfully to a student or to your learners? So with teaching method, just how you discuss the method and you explain how you can execute it successfully. Just how is it done and how can you execute it successfully. So that's one of the things that I actually mentioned, that some students just discuss the method and they don't really explain how this method can be applied. And we have another issues questions that comes on either you are asked to describe, explain, or discuss how schools can support, or you as a teacher can support learners with special needs. So we have learners with special needs. So what these questions most of the times what we ask is for you maybe to explain how you as a teacher can support a learner with special needs. And then in this question, we just want you to put in, to actually explain to us how you can actually help with learners with special needs. For instance, maybe like want to, like some of these points are actually already in your study guide, and you just need to understand how you can actually help with students with special needs. For instance, you maybe need to talk to parents and learners to motivate them to learn, or you read learners the individual education plans, then you can get more information to learn what modification need to be actually made. And maybe you just need to be more like to encourage these students, and you focus on their strength and be supportive to their weaknesses. So this question actually just as it appears in your guideline, you just need to tell us how you can actually support a learner with special need. And then we do have another topic on a unit on self-esteem, peer pressure, and subsistence abuse. So Uh, Peer pressure, actually, like most the youth, or the adolescents, or they actually, or teenagers, they try to to encounter problems with peer pressure, and this is whereby they have to conform to the values and behavioral norms of a certain group. So they kind of have to fit in a certain group. So the conformity of group standards actually can be a problems that means that your learners may experience problems with peer pressure. And you're saying there is negative peer pressure, like for instance, now the students or learners tend to do maybe alcohol, to abuse alcohol, or because they tend to kind of fit in their group. So, but there are also negative peer pressure, whereby the peer pressure, not all is bad. So you have the positive one, whereby maybe your learners are motivated to actually achieve by their peers, and then maybe improve or develop their social skills and communication skills, as well as leadership skill. So we with this, in most cases, we tend to ask you either to discuss or define peer pressure. So you should be able to define peer pressure. You should also be able to analyze or explain these negative peer pressure, as well as the positive peer pressure. So once you get the questions on peer pressure, try to see whether the question is actually asking you about the negative peer pressure or the positive peer pressure, because not all pressures or peer pressures are bad. So, and in the same topic, we tend also to ask questions on how to deal, or how you can advise learners to resist or deal with peer pressure. So, for instance, they have to communicate their boundaries very strongly or assertively. And how do they communicate their boundaries? Like, this is where it goes. So, just say no when you mean no. So, like, how do how do you tell your learners on how to communicate their boundaries assertively? Like, they must just have respect for themselves and listen and talk, and then when they say no, they should just mean no. So, and another issue is on alcohol and substance abuse. So there, with this topic, we tend to actually ask questions on, like, what are the reasons that people are consuming alcohol and or abusing alcohol and subsistence. And there are actually several reasons out there. So we tend to actually become more excited when we see these questions and people are just generalizing too much. So just make sure that when you ask the reasons, try to actually structure. And I like it to mention that when you are sometimes when you have a question that when you such questions where you have so many reasons or so many things that you want to mention, try to look at which one is more critical. So you don't just start with the low, not so good points. So try to start with the good points and as such. So which one is more critical? Then you answer them as it goes. Start with the strongest points. I hope that's clear. So, and then the impact on human health, life and relationship. So the in your unit, we have this. They say unit. In your module study guide, you have issues or the topic on alcohol and substance use, and the reasons are actually clearly stated in that. But you are also welcome to mention your own reasons. We actually don't want only to conform you to the guidelines, but you can also, as long as the answer is right. So you also have a table on the impact of alcohol or substance abuse on human health, life, as well as in relationship. So, and you should bear in mind that sometimes we only ask the impact on human health. So, and in the previous either exams or exam or assignments, I can't remember very well, but then you tend to you tend to give when you're asked maybe the impact on human health, you tend to talk too much on how it affects relationships and life, but not really focus on human health. So these questions try to actually read the question clearly and understand whether it's asking about how it affects life and relationship, or it's only asks you to mention about the human health. And in addition to that, we can also ask you to discuss how school can assist in the prevention of substance or alcohol abuse by learners. So in that, you have to come up with strategies which schools can apply in order to prevent the abuse of alcohol or substance by the learners. You also have such information also in the study guide that can help you, and you can build on such. So, and another topic or unit that you actually want you to focus on that I experienced a problem previously when it comes to answers is the topic on sunlight and forces. Sunlight is a mixture of different colors that can actually be separated into spectrum of colors. So there was a time when I asked a very simple question that I thought was simple actually, because I just ask people to list different colors of white light, and I came to get so many different colors. So just know the different colors and also know you should be able to demonstrate how colors or white color can actually be separated by use of prisma. And not only prisma, there are also different ways of separating, like using a CD or compact disc and so forth. So just when you are asked to demonstrate, for instance, when you are demonstrating, you should be able to start with mentioning the things that you actually need. So what do you need for you? For instance, try to write as if you are going to demonstrate to your learners. So just make sure that you mention what you actually going to need. For instance, you actually need a prisma, for instance, when you are demonstrating how the light can be separated by prisma. So then you mention what you actually need, for instance, the prisma, the project screen, the light source, and the slate, and then you then demonstrate or write about how the method. So how are you going to do it, so you can actually demonstrate on how this can be actually separated. Where do you put the prisma, where do you put the project screen, and where do you put your light source, and so forth. So what things do you need? All in all, I'm saying you should just talk about what is that you need for you to demonstrate how you can separate by prisma, and then the method, how step by step how you can actually do the demonstration. So, and another unit is on the scientific process. With this scientific process, there are actually different apparatus or equipment that are actually used in the lab. And with this unit, you actually need to know the names. You should be able to identify the apparatus that are actually used, be able to identify them. You should be able to know which one is a beaker and what is the use of the beaker in the lab, and which one is a goggle and how it's actually used. And for all the the equipment or the apparatus that is actually used in the lab, you should be able to identify them and describe or actually explain how it's actually used. And you should also be able to actually demonstrate some of the scientific processes. For instance, the distillation or filtration, and at times we ask you to actually with a diagram to explain these processes using a diagram. I know not all of us are good at drawing, but if you have your point clearly, you should be able to put that into paper, like just draw where your flask is and where is your heat source when it comes to distillation. So just be able to actually put in like a drawing to explain or to support your explanation when it comes to some of the scientific processes. And also with the filtrations, how is it actually done. So with that, I noticed that some students don't actually, or they put a diagram, but then they don't write anything about the process anymore. So when, as I said, try to read the question carefully. If you are asked to explain something and with the aid of diagram explain, so you have a diagram and you have an explanation how the process is actually to explain the process. So don't just give a diagram and you don't explain, and in the same vein don't just explain without a diagram, because most of the times we have marks that are allocated to the explanation as well as to the diagram. So try to actually do both to score your marks. And another unit is on the ecosystem and human activities. So in this topic, we try to actually ask you either to analyze or explain the ecosystem or just define what is ecosystem. So you should be able to define what the ecosystem is and also define it very clearly. This information are actually available in your study guide. So here I'm just trying to guide you on what we want to get from you when it comes to our questions. So, and when it comes to women activities, we actually asked you to discuss how human activities can influence the ecosystem negatively, especially when they actually perform in an excessive or unsustainable way. So in these human activities, we do have agriculture, industries, mining and fishing. So and with that, we want you to briefly explain how these activities can actually influence the ecosystem negatively when they are performed in excessive and unsustainable way. So you should be able to, like for instance, industry. How does industry or mining influences the ecosystem negatively? So as I'm saying, look at the marks. You might also just be asked to list the human activities that influences the ecosystem negatively. In that way, maybe you only have 4 marks, and then you mention agriculture, industries, mining, and fishing. But as I said, this actually questions depends on how many marks or what is actually asked from you. So you should be able also to explain what's going on or how those activities actually influence the ecosystem negatively. And in the same vein, we might ask you on how you can prevent or how to prevent the destructions of habitat and preserve the biodiversity. So with these questions, you might just be asked to list or mention what can be done to prevent the destructions of habitat and preserve the biodiversity. And then you just mentions like way of doing it, like for instance reducing or eliminating the use of household chemicals and pesticide, or actually when it's come to recycling, or for instance recycle as much waste as you can, reduce the amount of waste that you produce and reduce the carbon footprint, and choose the food that is actually grown locally and grown sustainably. So depending on the marks and what is asked, just try to either explain. If you are actually asked to explain, try to give more than just the points. Try to elucidate on what is asked, just to add meat to the bones. So, and another topic is on water, wind, and pollution. And well, the easiest questions maybe you can be asked is just to mention the features and the phases of water cycle. And if you are asked to explain them, just go more than just mentioning the processes or the phases that is going, or the phases, but also try to explain how this about explain the phases of water cycle. So, and also on water pollution and purifications, there is one question that we actually ask a lot about purification of water, how to make water drinkable. And with this, you need, if you are asked to mention only the methods, you can only mention the method. But if you are asked to discuss, then go much in details and elucidate on the methods that are actually used to purify water. So with the wind, wind can be important. So you might be asked to discuss the importance or the benefit of wind. It can also be dangerous. So you can also be asked to discuss the dangers of tornadoes or hurricanes. And you may also ask to just mention maybe the sources of air pollution, and mentioning things like burning of fossil fuel, agricultural activity, and so forth. So, and with this, you can just mention, if you're asked to mention, just read the question carefully, and if you are explaining, so you should be able to explain how these factors or these sources can actually can be a source of air pollution. How does it affect or contribute to air pollution? And that also maybe asks you to explain the impact of air pollution on lungs, on the lungs. So that's actually more on human health. So how does that, as you can see in the pictures, you have a danger of wind, and you can imagine how that can actually influence the environment, and maybe what are the impacts of air pollution on the lungs. So you should just be able to actually read the question. If you are asked to define, just define the terms. If you are asked to go much in details and maybe discuss, just try to discuss and critically, and just add more information than just mentioning the facts. And with animals, we most of the times ask how scientists actually classify animals into groups. So animals are actually classified into different groups. So, and this classification is based on whether they have backbone and how their bodies are actually arranged, and they are actually also, the scientists also look at the internal features as well as the external features. So just how these animals are related to each other. So with that question, in most cases, we just ask you to explain to explain the criteria that animal or scientists actually use, or how these animals are actually classified into different groups. So you should just able to just not mention, but try to explain how these animals are actually classified into different groups. So in wildlife, as you can see the picture there was a time when I actually asked about the big five, and I actually just made like asked people to mention the big five, but we couldn't. There were some people who couldn't answer the question. So you should be able to answer some of those questions. Just know the big five, and also you should be able to answer questions like, for instance, what are the importance of wildlife. So, and they have economic importance, which can also comes as in consumption or non-consumptive uses. So, what are the importance even to the ecosystem or ecology or nature? And what are the importance of this wildlife? Why is that wildlife is important to the Namibian economy, for instance? You should be able to explain such. And then we have some of the endangered species. So you should be able to explain what is the endangered species. You should also be able to mention some of the endangered species in Namibia. So they are also available on the screen as well as on your study guides. You have such information. So the main key is to read your study guide carefully and read it thoroughly, so you can at least understand or be able to explain some of the questions. So human body and health. So the human body is made up of 11 important organ systems, and those organ systems, there are different organ systems. You should be able to mention the organ system, and in most cases we actually asked about the circulatory system, where we asked you to mention about the components and their actually uses. So you should be able to mention that and actually be able to explain actually their uses, and smoking and how smoking can actually affect the lungs, or actually also as respiratory diseases. With that, thank you very much. And as I emphasize, or before I come to the end of this contact classes slide or presentation, I just want to actually uh, echo again what I actually said before. So one thing is that you should read your study guide, prepare for the exams, and the exams are actually structured in a short questions where you only have maybe to mention or list some of the questions, and you also have long questions that are actually like structures in a way that you have to discuss critically some of the processes, or actually just explain some of the processes, or some of the things that you might be asked. So all in all, you just need to prepare for the exams, read your study guide carefully. If you come to the exams, don't panic, read the question, the instructions on the question paper. Try to give relevant examples when you need to give examples. Don't write too much or too little. Look at the marks that are allocated for each questions, and as you write and write neatly, and try to just aim for more than 50% in your exams. Try to aim for 80s and 90s or even 100%, so that when things are not well, then you maybe come to 90. All in all, you're welcome to call me at that number. In case you have questions, you can contact me at 081 2612 950. Thank you very much, and all the best for your exams.